Let me introduce you to Anthony Lowenstein. He's an independent journalist and author. He joins us live from Sydney. Anthony, it's really good to have you on Al Jazeera. We are not, as you know, in possession of all the facts right now, but it's pretty clear that this was an attack on Sydney's Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah. I understand from watching one of your podcasts or listening to one of your podcasts that you were celebrating yourself at home. I mean, how are you feeling today?
I was celebrating. I'm Jewish, I'm Australian, and I was celebrating at home. I live about half an hour by car from Bondi in Sydney, and I was celebrating Hanukkah. I'm not a religious person, but it's more of a cultural event. It's sort of something to mark, and my family and children enjoy it. Last night, and I found out about this attack pretty soon after it happened. I mean, how do I feel about it today? I am distraught, I am angry, I am deeply, deeply frustrated with what I already see as the weaponization of this attack by many members of the political elite in Australia and globally, many in the media. But also there's many elephants in the room. We don't know, as you say, all the details of why these two killers did what they did. Apparently they travelled to the Philippines in the last few months before this attack, which doesn't mean anything on its own, but potentially had some connection to Southeast Asian Islamist groups. We'll find out more about that in time. But what really saddens me is that so many, and I say this as someone Jewish organisations and politicians have made a direct link and connection between yesterday's attack and pro-Palestine marches. Criticism of Israel in the last 2.5 years since October 7, as if somehow anyone knows what the motivations of the killers were. They don't. And secondly, this idea somehow that peaceful protest in a country like Australia, or anywhere for that matter, against Israel's genocide is somehow unacceptable. And many Jewish people as involved in those protests are involved in that activity. So I've got very, very mixed emotions, to be honest, very mixed emotions.
And Anthony, you touched upon this. I mean, but last year, Australia, we know, appointed an anti-Semitism envoy, Gillian Segal, over fears of rising anti-Semitism in the country. An anti-Islamophobia envoy has since been appointed too. I mean, in the wake of the Bondi attack, Gillian Segal said, we need to stop with the hate, stop the chant, stop with the waving of terrorist flags, because it progresses just as we saw at the Opera House, Harbour Bridge, and now Bondi Beach, each a progression of hateful words leading to where we are today. I mean, you already mentioned a few months ago, 300,000 people took part in that March for Humanity over the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge to oppose the war in Gaza. How do you see these comments? Do they make Australian Jews feel safer?
Well, I think they're outrageous, and it's worth saying for your viewers to understand that Gillian Segal, who was appointed by the Australian government as the anti-Semitism envoy, is one of the former leaders of the pro-Israel lobby, so it's pretty clear where she stands. When she made some of these comments, within hours of this attack in Bondi, she made a direct connection between protests in support of Palestine and the terrorist act, which is an outrageous thing to say. A few months ago, she had proposals about what she said would stamp out anti-Semitism, which involves some kind of overview, presumably by her or someone else, about what is allegedly anti-Semitism if government money is going to universities or to arts organisations. Now, I, as a Jew, fundamentally, of course, oppose anti-Semitism. But what is happening here is clearly what we see in many, many other countries, a deliberate conflation, a dishonest conflation between criticism of Israel, which is legitimate and frankly necessary when it's a belligerent occupier and has committed genocide against Palestinians, and anti-Semitism. They are not the same thing. Anti-Semitism is real, it's increasing, it's worse, and it's a problem. Yesterday's attack in Bondi clearly is a vile abomination and anti-Semitic. No question about that. But the idea somehow that huge amounts of people in Australia, including Jews around the world, are protesting the Israeli government, that somehow makes us complicit in an anti-Semitic hate crime and terrorism, that's an outrageous thing to say. Gillian Segal will not be providing a solution to this problem at all. And there are huge amounts of Jewish people that I know who fundamentally oppose what she stands for, what she's trying to propose, which is very similar to many other similar, I would argue, pro-Israel fanatics that exist in other countries around the world. It's outrageous.
The Israeli government was, as you know, very quick to condemn the attack on Australian Jews, but also to essentially say, we told you so. I mean, Australia recently recognised Palestinian statehood. The Australian government has called out the famine and suffering in Gaza. I mean, what does it mean to you, Anthony, for a foreign power to be speaking so firmly what is essentially a matter of Australian domestic and foreign policy?
It's absolutely disgusting that within hours of this attack, Benjamin Netanyahu, senior members of the Israeli government, the Foreign Minister, the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, and many, many others are putting out comments on X, essentially blaming the Albanese government, that's the government in Australia, for recognising Palestine, and somehow it's Albanese's fault. Now, I'm not a big supporter of Albanese. It's worth saying for viewers that the government in Australia has been sending F-35 fighter jet parts to Israel in the last 2.5 years. None of that has stopped. So to suggest somehow that the Australian government is fanatically anti-Israel is simply delusional. What the pro-Israel forces want, and what they've said, including Gillian Segal, there should be no public protests in support of Palestine. Now, we live in a democracy. Last time I checked, a flawed one, but a democracy. We have the right to protest. A peaceful protest is legitimate and legal. And the idea of the Israeli government, a government that frankly has no moral authority to speak, this is a government which is full of far-right, racist fanatics. And what is so disgraceful is you have pro-Israel members of the parliament, journalists and others who essentially look to the Israeli government for leadership on this question. Are you serious? Because Israel is a self-described Jewish state does not mean that it provides security and safety. And as a Jew, I am saying, as I've said for years, as many Jews are saying, Israeli actions, none of it justifies what happened yesterday. We don't even know the real motivations yet. But Jewish safety is in fact worsened by Israeli violence. And there's just no question about that. So to conflate these issues is deeply outrageous and offensive and inappropriate. And the Israeli government needs to frankly shove it. And that's being polite.
As the investigators start their work, as the floral tributes mount the side of the attack on Bondi Beach, I mean, Anthony, at this moment of heightened sensitivity, I mean, how do Australians mourn in a healthy way, without risk of manipulation, either from those inside Australia seeking to exploit division, or indeed those outside Australia?
Look, mourning is vital and necessary, both for all the victims and whether they're Jewish or others, to support them, to give them whatever medical care they need, to facilitate anything else that they might need. And I notice the Australian government is doing that at the moment. And mourning also means how you tackle these issues. Now, again, I caveat my comments with saying we don't know all the details at all about the killers of this case. But if this ends up being an Islamist attack, an ISIS-type attack, which it sort of seems to be, this has sadly happened in many, many other countries around the world in the last 10, 15 years. And the way you deal with that is not to suppress speech or suppress legitimate conversation about key issues, or demonising Islam, or demonising all Muslims, or suggesting, as some are, that we should close the borders, not allow any Muslims in the country. There are 27 million Australians, roughly. There's about 800,000 Muslims and about 120,000 Jews, roughly. Now, Australia is a very, very flawed democracy, has a deep, long history of racism against our Indigenous population and refugees. I'm not for a second idealising our country. But these kind of mass shootings are very, very rare in the extreme. And if there's any silver lining in this, I noticed today the Australian government and all the states have agreed, and I hope this will happen in the coming months, much tighter gun laws, something that would never happen in America after insane amounts of mass shootings. But the way that we mourn is to be sober, is not to jump to conclusions, is not to jump to racist overtones. And I've been writing and posting about this in the last day, including, as you said, on my podcast. And most people have been supportive of a sane voice, but there are some, and we all know these people exist online, but also, frankly, in much of the political and media space, who want to exploit it for their own agendas. And those agendas are deeply antagonistic towards Islam and Muslims and immigration and multiculturalism and Palestine. And we will not let that happen.
Anthony Lowenstein, it's been really important to hear your voice at this time of heightened sensitivities, of course, in Sydney after the attack on Bondi Beach yesterday. Many thanks.
Thanks so much.
Don't miss out on the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.